wide range of leading edge skills, and I'm going to talk through some of those in a minute. There's a lot of companies in Scotland, and very many of them you can't see. When we had an electronics industry in Scotland, you could drive around and see these big factories and you knew they were there. The vast majority of the software sector in Scotland is in small to medium-sized companies, many of them represented here today by our panel. And you tend not to be aware of them, but there's over 1,000 companies working in the industry in Scotland. So there's a lot of opportunity, lots of choice, and lots of startups happening, very thriving startup scene. So if you want to set up your own business, this is a great place to do it. So this is the demand we currently face. In Scotland alone, we're going to need somewhere around 50,000 new people coming into the industry over the next 5 years, around 10,000 vacancies each year for the next 5 years. That's not likely to let up in the foreseeable future beyond that 5-year period, and in fact the demand is likely to increase as everybody moves into digital. That in the context of Europe, so if you decide not to stay in Scotland, there's plenty of other opportunities elsewhere. The EC Commissioner for Skills identified that as being around 1 million roles by 2020, likely to be unfilled across Europe. As I think my colleagues here who work in various parts of the industry will tell you, as we discussed this morning, demand for jobs is getting tighter by the day. Everybody is screaming out for people. So from your point of view, this is a seller's market. You should be able to walk into interesting jobs at the price you want if you can negotiate well. And we're likely to see in the industry, we've seen 10% year-on-year growth over the last 5 years. Everybody else has been going through that thing called a recession. It's not been hitting the IT sector. And we've seen software companies growing year-on-year by 10% plus, and that's likely to continue for the next little while as well. So again, that just underlines the fact that huge demand for people, lots of opportunity. So think hard before you decide to go on to further research. See Rod at the back here, he's going to beat me up afterwards. And there's a range of challenging roles out there, and I think you'll be aware of many of them. The current buzzwords around data science and analytics, but you know, we need technical architects. We need increasingly people who understand how to create software products and how to bring that to market. The move in the last 10 years within the software sector in particular from delivering software services to delivering software product has been significant. It's a range of new skills that we're still trying to get our heads around, and we need all of you to help us make that happen. And then solutions architects, project managers, a whole range of development skills, and a number of the panel are going to talk about the software development requirements they have. So there's something for everybody here, whatever your particular interests are, and I think that the ability to bring innovation, bring new thinking to business is what many of our member companies are looking for. They need really bright, capable people like yourselves. So I just sort of did a brain dump on all the skills that we're currently being asked for. On the right-hand side, try to be a bit more technical. On the left-hand side, it's more probably about slightly wider groupings of skills. But you know, if you go and talk to any of our employers at the moment, they're screaming out for some of this. And if you've got those skills and some of those skills, or you know, particular specialities on the left-hand side of the slide here, you know, virtualization, analytics, people who understand how to work in an agile environment, these are all the things the industry is currently looking for. And I think also be aware of who's here. We have, and this is only a small group of them, of a wide range of businesses working in the Scottish environment. Some of them you may have heard of under different names. There's been quite a lot of merger and acquisition activity recently. So people like Amore Group have been swallowed up by Lockheed Martin. But you know, we have everybody here from Amazon through to Rockstar North, JP Morgan, Microsoft, a wide range of multinational companies with quite significant bases in Scotland. CGI, for example, are currently building a new development centre, 250 staff doing open source development. So we look beyond the brand, look at what they're doing here and see what the jobs are. And then on the small to medium-sized company side, we have a very wide range of companies. People employing 2 or 3 members of staff, right up to people employing several hundreds of staff. And some of them are represented here today. So we've got Malzi, Iridia, Bright Solid, Skyscanner on our panel today. I put Bright Solid on, that's also DC Thompson, so Simon's both sides of the fence, I hope, as far as that's concerned. But a broad range of companies doing a wide range of things, everything from people like Tigerface doing educational games, Skyscanner, I'm sure you all use Skyscanner to find your flights around the world. I certainly hope so. People like Indes who do e-commerce, smart analytics for the e-commerce sector. So it's a very broad range of companies, and if you need to find some of them, if you're looking for some of them, a good place to start is on the Scotland IS website. We represent about 300 companies across the whole of the Scottish IT industry, but there are other companies as well. And finally, if you're thinking about starting up your own business, we've got a thriving startup scene, particularly in Edinburgh, but it's not the only place. And there are a number of incubators who are helping people get their idea from a concept through to being a marketable product. You can establish yourselves at places like TechCube and Codebase and the eSpark centres. You'll get help from people with legal advice, with accountancy advice, with business advice. And actually Scotland's one of the best places in Europe and possibly in the world to start up in terms of access to finance. Big business angel network, lots of people who've got experience of investing in technology companies. A lot of people who have built and sold technology companies are now reinvesting in them. So you've got access to some very experienced professional investors. And with things like the Scottish Enterprise Funded Co-Investment Fund, access to next stage funding is also relatively straightforward. I think when you get beyond that, and I think people like Skyscanner have found that recently, you need to go globally for your capital. But even that's happening for some of our companies. So it's a great place to start a business, but it's also a great industry to come and work in with established businesses. I hope that gives you a bit of background to why we want all of you to come and work in industry and bring your brilliance to our industry and to help us move it forward and grow it further. I'm going to now help with the sort of facilitate the panel session, so we're hoping you've got some really good questions for the panel.
I'm Alistair Han, I'm the CTO at Skyscanner. So after finishing my doctorate in machine learning, I decided to leave academia and go and found my own online travel startup, which I ran for about 3 years, and then that was acquired by Skyscanner 3.5 years ago. And then since then I've been there, and I'm now the Chief Technology Officer. So I'm responsible for the technical strategy of the business. I run the architecture team, but also the labs team, which is our R&D function.
Hi, Hi, I'm Rodrigo Barnes, and I'm CTO at Iridia. We're a clinical informatics and increasingly a bioinformatics company.
Sorry, just turn your mics on.
Can you hear me now?
You should be now.
Okay. All right. So we work with healthcare data here in the UK, in Australia, and in the Gulf. We started about 6 years ago, spun out of Dundee University, and now based in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And my background is really having worked on that edge between university and startups, and this is probably about my 5th company that's a startup. So looking forward to answering your questions.
My name's Andrew Burkett. So I work for Amazon now. I did my degree at Edinburgh. I've worked for a number of startups over the years, and then for the last 9 years, I've worked with Amazon. So Amazon's got a development centre in Edinburgh. We've got about 70 developers working on Amazon's recommendations and catalogue and a bunch of machine learning, NLP kind of tasks for all of Amazon's global websites. I'm primarily a software engineer. Over the last few years, I've moved into kind of data science, data analysis, and statistics kind of roles, and that's one of the cool things I think about Amazon is it's the merge between large-scale software engineering and the availability of all this data and extracting interesting patterns. I've also managed to spend a bit of time between industry and academia events like this, and also helping out in collaborative projects. So I've got a bit of insight on kind of both sides of the world and how they relate. And I've also seen a lot of people coming on board, joining Amazon, and seeing how their background in academia, how that relates to the roles that we do in software development.
Good morning, my name is Simon Albert. I'm the Group Head of HR for DC Thomson. I'll not talk to you about HR because I'm sure you're not particularly interested in that. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what DC Thomson does. We're a local firm based in Dundee, headquartered in Scotland, very proud of it. The business is over 200 years old. It was founded originally in shipping, moved into publishing, and we publish newspapers, magazines, books, etc. We generate about half a billion of turnover a year. All our profit comes currently from our old industries, from our publishing businesses, and we're busy reshaping. So effectively, we have a trading business, we have an investment business. We have a couple of seed operations, one in London, one in Dundee, called Idea Scotland in Dundee and Idea London, and we provide startup facilities for young entrepreneurs like yourselves who want to come out and take an idea and generate it, give you maybe 6 months of office facilities and infrastructure and support through some of our business partners, through the universities or through SICSA. And we then take you to a stage where if there is a business idea that we like and you like, then we provide seed funding. And we can take people through from first stage up to second stage funding where we'd look to bring in other partners. So what we're doing as an organisation is changing ourselves from a traditional old world publishing business in the sunrise industries, if you like, or sunset industries, and trying to generate new ideas and reshape the rest of the greater part of our business, which provides half our turnover but none of our profit, so that we flip that, so that the new parts of our business are starting to generate all our profit. So we're very much focusing on new ideas, new innovations, particularly in the digital space, through our currently genealogy business, cloud hosting solutions. We've got some games businesses starting up, and we've got some other small, interesting little different things in the education, edutainment world.
My name's Callie. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Mallsy. We basically search about 2 million items of clothing from about 200 retailers to then only show you the stuff that suits you. We are a fully fledged startup. We're growing quite quickly though, so we started about a year ago and we're now at 9 members of staff with I think 5 open positions. We've been through 2 rounds of investment. Yahoo recently selected us as one of the 6 apps that changed the way the world shops. And we like to think of ourselves as a fun and interesting place to be. We focus on stuff like recommendation systems, and we're now looking more and more at the data that we generate. Our app generally turns off several tens of thousands of kind of data points per day from kind of interactions around clothing, and we use that to then provide recommendations on the back of that as well.
Thanks, Callie. Okay, so it's over to you guys now.
Two things occur to me. One is, like most things, when you start out, you don't know what you don't know, and it's important to focus on, to accept that on day one, and to avail yourself of opportunities to uncover stuff. So if you go into a particular market, and a lot of my startup experience within medical visualization, there's a lot of learning about that market that you need to do to understand it. My particular experience was that the technology we were building to a certain extent was too new, too ahead of the curve, and we spent a lot of time trying to educate the entire world as to the need for this new technology, and that's a very expensive thing to do for a small startup. But I think a certain degree of humility and realising that you don't know half the stuff that you need to know, and figuring out how to sort that out is probably the main thing.
Alison.
I guess all entrepreneurs make lots of mistakes along the way. I think one of the great things that's available now is a number of communities and groups and incubators to help startups. So we were very lucky to be involved with C-Camp down in London, but there are sort of many other sort of incubators around now as well. So I think if it's going to be a mistake, it was going to be around making sure from the get-go to embrace the kind of the tools and the technologies and everything that's available now, and it just continues to get better to build sort of web companies very efficiently. There's another thing which was talking about earlier was how distracting things like fundraising can be. So not letting yourself get distracted from just building your products and getting it out there in front of people and validating it. You spend an awful lot of time having lots of meetings with people who like having meetings rather than doing the main thing.
Callie.
It was us that was having that conversation. I think know your weaknesses is the first thing. I think I've done things that failed miserably, and now are doing things that seem to be going in the right direction. And I think what the big learning curve and the difference between the two of them is actually saying, you know what, I'm really rubbish at certain things. I'm not a product manager. I'm not that technically minded on certain aspects. So find people that supplement that. Don't be the lone wolf. Don't try to do it all yourself, and kind of supplement past that point. I think from that kind of that element is enjoy it. Like, mistakes are there to be made. If there was some kind of thing that says just don't do all these things and you'll be successful, it wouldn't be half as interesting, it wouldn't be half as fun. And in reality, a mistake is only a problem if you don't actually learn something from that process. So don't beat yourself up about it, and just keep going. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in startup land is actually, you'll be successful as long as you keep plodding on and you keep learning from the things that you do.
Rodrigo, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. So there's plenty of things that you can get wrong, absolutely. I think the one thing I'll do less of in my next startup is probably won't approach it like I have in the past, where I'm a builder of things, a maker of things. I think all I really want to do is make that thing. So I think I would avoid going for grant funding and really focus much more on getting a product commercially validated. I think that would be, so I think there are a lot of people offering funding, especially in the early stage, kind of SMART awards, or I don't know what they're called now, but and those can be really useful, but just choose those very carefully, because a bit like the fundraising, it takes up a lot of time, and actually they're not your market. You're not selling to Scottish Enterprise.
Simon, anything you'd like to add?
From the startups that I've seen in our business, I think get yourself into a community of practice, be in a startup environment where you can bounce ideas off other people. I think it's a really tough gig to be a lone wolf and sit in your garage and build a business. You need people to be able to talk to, and don't be afraid to ask for things for free. When you meet professional services firms like lawyers, accountants, they all want to do something for you for free in the first instance because they want to be the first person who worked with the next Skyscanner, and they can see the pound signs and they'll do things for you for free in the early days. There will become a point when the invoices will start to arrive, but just be canny about it.
I'm going to start with Simon on this one. Oh, sorry, was that unkind?
Give me a full stop.
Okay, Rodrigo, do you want to handle that first and give Simon a chance to?
Yeah, I guess it's really unusual to be able to apply what you've studied or what you've researched directly. You may have to kind of incubate it for a while yourself in somewhere else and get some. I think if what you've been researching you think has a product in there or a service, then why not develop it yourself? But find that community and the partners to work to get you to market. I think if you do go from PhD into employment, you just have to be aware that people are probably not hiring you for the topic that you researched, and that shouldn't really disappoint you. So just think carefully about what you're picking. But if that idea is strong enough, you should just carry it with you until you get an opportunity to turn it into a product. So I think if your question is who's responsible for it, it's probably yourself, I think.
Alistair, what would your view be?
Well, obviously there's quite a few different paths you can take to commercialising things that come out of research, and I don't know what's available in some, like St Andrews, for example, but I know from previous universities I worked out there being sort of branches of business to do explicitly exploiting IP. So if it's a moral question of whether the idea gets used or not, then there's potentially a chance for it will get licensed elsewhere. So I guess it's up to you whether you want to be associated with that idea and drive it through to fruition. Do you want to be an entrepreneur and to take these things through, in which case you've got a great opportunity because you may well be the expert on doing it, but I guess there are other mechanisms for getting research out into commercial products.
Andrew, I mean, you're always looking at Amazon for new ideas, but do you go out into the market and engage with researchers to try and find those ideas?
I think there's a mix. I think when we're hiring people, predominantly we're hiring software developers. It's relatively rare that someone's PhD topic aligns very closely with something that we're working on day to day. I think in Amazon, we have problems because of the massive scale and the low latencies, distributed systems, data science problems that we have. There are lots of interesting research level topics that emerge in that environment. But I think when we're hiring people, we're looking for solid software development skills, we're looking for good communication skills, we're looking for evidence that you've owned an idea, be it your PhD topic, and like really understand it and communicate it to people. Because primarily we're focused on producing great customer experience, making sure that when you order Christmas presents, that they arrive, you find the stuff that you want. We're focused on product, essentially. We are involved with several universities in facilitating projects. We've got a bunch of interesting problems that we'd love to have more time to dive into, and we're involved in helping universities understand what these problems are and being able to do either MSc projects or PhD projects that are tackling things that we perceive as a need. So I think these are two different sides. I think coming out of PhD joining industry, we're looking for software engineering skills and breadth. But then there's also the interaction with existing people who are in the research mode, and we can contribute to that there.
So have you got a potential product in mind? Have you got something that you've been doing in research that you would like to take out into the marketplace?
Well, not exactly, yes, but not only. Also, what worries me, if my work is possibly have practical application, if I won't stimulate it to be a product or do something,
will it just get left on the shelf?
It will go on the shelf.
Yeah.
And what is the reason?
Yeah.
Polly, can I just add something?
Yes,
just
sure.
occurs to me while the others were answering. I think finding ways in between, commercialization and employment, if you can find ways of, getting bite-sized chunks of what you work in to people who might be interested. So find the opportunity to do a small bit of consulting. That's the kind of thing we work in biomedical informatics, which is very varied and very specialist areas. And often our challenge is to find someone for a very short period of time who really knows that topic. And I think if you can somehow find someone that's corresponding to what you have to offer for 5 days or a day of consulting, you really learn a lot from that, I think.
And I'm going to come back to you now, Simon. So if this young man came to you and said, I've got this idea, I'm interested in starting up a business, then if he came to Idea Scotland or to the Idea Lab in London, then your environment there can help him to shape that up into whether or not it is a product, or are you expecting somebody to come with a more thought-through business idea?
I think that if you've got a research product and you're looking to turn it into something which you can sell, you're either going to bring it into the business, in which case you're bringing your intellect and you lose the product to the business, or you're going to have to build it yourself to a certain stage at which it becomes valuable. So there are two approaches, I guess. Bring your intellect and bring your product and risk losing it, and maybe apply your knowledge elsewhere, or develop that product while you're in the business, but the business might not sponsor you through it. Or you try and develop it yourself to a certain stage at which it becomes attractive, and then someone will give you funding for it to grow it. So it really depends whether you can see some real vision in what you're providing, or whether it is purely a piece of research.
Okay, thank you. And Callie, anything you wanted to
I
add?
think it's an interesting one. I think in reality it comes down to whether or not what you want in life, and if this is something that you're massively passionate about, then I don't think anyone should tell you that you shouldn't do it, and I think you should dive into it and you should kind of push it onto that next level. It will come down to yourself, and I think it comes back to the point that I made a minute ago about where you see your strengths and weaknesses lie. If you are someone that can make a fantastic product and is research driven, but you don't know how to go out there and sell it, is even outside of universities you'll find people that want to do this sort of thing but don't have your skill set, and sometimes marrying up the two together and having that run at making a startup is worthwhile doing. There's plenty of support out there, through Polly and the guys at Scotland IS. There's lots of opportunities to kind of win funding or kind of get little bits of reward to keep yourself going. And in reality, you're young enough that you can spend a year doing something. If it doesn't work out, you'll be just as employable to everyone on this panel. Probably more so because you've actually spent the time to do something yourself and kind of go through that stage. So I think if you really do believe in it, it's definitely worthwhile doing. And there is enough of an ecosystem out there. We kind of touched on Codebase, TechCube. Christ, we rent out most of our office space to other businesses. And actually kind of allow them to kind of share our space and kind of make a community around that. So there's plenty of places out there for you to go with it. It's just deciding on which one's the right one for you.
I was just going to come back in very quickly and say that in our experience there is far more money out there chasing good ideas than there are good ideas. So if you've got a good idea and you think you can make money from it, you really should pursue it, because there's a lot of money scrabbling about for somewhere to invest at the moment. And that doesn't mean that you'll get, if your idea is poor, you'll automatically get money. But it does mean that if you've formed it to a reasonable stage and you've thought it through and you can present it well, then you've got a very good chance of getting some support.
Callie, you've just recently raised some funding, haven't you? What's your view?
I think it's a really broad question because every business is different. So we are a consumer internet business, and we need lots of money to get to the point where we make enough money back to pay for everything that we need to do and need to achieve. If you're going after corporate clients and you get one sale and that does 3 developers for the next 6 months, then there's that side of things. Like, as Simon mentioned, there's money out there, but it has to be for the right ideas. The tax regime for investors is very attractive just now, especially if it's sub £150,000, because they can pretty much write the whole thing off against tax. I think they get 101% of their investment back if you mess up and go bankrupt in the first year, so it's kind of risk-free for them to a certain extent. In terms of what I would do, as I say, it really does depend on the product. If you can get out there and generate sales, that's the cheapest money that you can get. Raising investment is the most expensive cash that you can have, because you're giving away part of your business and you don't know what it's going to become, and it does take a huge amount of your time. From our point of view, we had a relatively high profile. We had a product that was winning lots of awards. We had a user base into the tens of thousands, and it took us 5 months to do it. Kind of from start to finish, and that includes all the legal work. And it's an expensive process as well, not just in terms of time, but also everything else that needs to go into it, so lawyers and stuff like that as well. So if you've got enough of a team that you can commit that time to it, then it's obviously worthwhile, but you need to make sure the momentum continues in everything else that's going on.
I suppose it's worth thinking about, like Callie was saying, why do you want the money? And some people would say, well, I need the money to grow and to actually be able to execute on it. Some people want to be able to sell a business. It really depends on your goals as a business, and if you want to have an organic growth over a long period of time, then you might not go after money for as long as possible. If you could develop your product, so you really need to look at what you're trying to.
If it's a land grab, then that's what you have to do. You have to say, what, we're going to be the first here and we're going to execute better than anyone else. And that normally does take cash, because you need to get smart people. You need to get people in this room to come and work for you. You need to do all those things. And sadly, people need money to live. It's a sad state of fact. But in reality, if that's your whole business model is land grab, then you can do a certain amount with nothing. I think that's a great. I now look back on what we achieved with absolutely no money and what we achieve now when we spend money, and it makes me quite sad, because I'm like, what, it now costs me the same to do what we did for nothing. But actually, if it's land grab as much of the land as you can before you try to get that cash to the door. Sorry.
Yeah, so if I can just add one thing. It also depends on most people here. To turn it around a little bit, if you're unlikely to be the chief exec of that startup, but likely to work for someone else in the first instance when you come out of your PhD, it's very useful to think about what's in it for the people who own the company that you work for. That's often something that I've certainly ignored starting up. I just want to make things, I want to get on with things. But think about why they're raising money for the company that you work for. And that's always a very good learning curve.
Alistair's also been involved in recently in some fairly major fundraising for Skyscanner. So what was your view?
Perhaps surprisingly, don't take money. Obviously, it does depend on the business, and if there's like a very long time to develop a product, and it's like a medical research or something, then certain things are necessitated. Or if it's a land grab and there's direct competitors and you're just trying to get a lot of users. But I personally put a huge value on organic growth of businesses, and although Skyscanner has received investment in the first 5 years of the business, it was organic growth. The founders did consultancy to pay for the other founders to work, and then they had enough revenue to get employee number 1, and then number 2, and then number 3. It wasn't until 5 years later, when it was profitable, that they actually took on funding. And I think for the business it's been excellent because it gives you a hunger to focus on the products that people find valuable, and it makes you hungry for revenue. It means you retain control of your business. It enables you to, once you've got investors, that changes the timeline of your business as well. So they may have a time they want to exit. That means you then need to exit. That limits your possibilities too. So I think building businesses organically is great, and it encourages you to do something very controversial, which is to generate revenue. It's not very fashionable creating revenue, but it does help pay salaries.
I think you do have to look at why you'd want to do it, and the pain point I think you've heard from the panel is it's much more time involved in raising funds than you ever thought. It's much more painful than you expected. That's certainly the experience we hear from companies time after time. I think the two things are, one, that the whole Landgrab bit is absolutely right. If you want to be the people in this particular area of the market, then you may have to buy that. And you need money to do that. The other bit is actually, if you want to go global fairly fast, you may need to be able to just buy the development staff to be able to scale up. That's what I think companies in the Valley do very well. They have easier access to more funding. I think what you see is if you compare growth of UK-based businesses with growth of companies based on the west coast of the States, they tend to grow faster, and they've done that partly by bringing in the money to be able to scale up their workforce very quickly. That means that they tend to become global players faster. So I think you just have to look at why. I would agree with Alistair. I think organic growth is much more honest, but you just have to look at the benefits of it. I'm just going to ask the rest of the panel who perhaps haven't been involved in fundraising particularly recently, just so they've got some inputs to that. Simon, anything you want to add to what we've just said?
The other thing, I guess, to think about is what your timeline is. You know, how long do you want to be taking that idea, and what's your exit strategy? So it's not just about growing it in the first instance. It's about, am I going to be a serial entrepreneur? Am I growing something and selling it? And when you take funding, you don't necessarily give away all your equity. That's part of the negotiation in the first instance. When you take the funding, is to say, you know, will I get some sort of an LTIP out of this? So over 5 years, I can get 10, 20, 30% of the growth of the business. And actually, that makes it risk-free for me, because it's someone else's money who's growing it for me. So it's about your appetite for your risk, it's about your time scale and your exit strategy. You need to think of all of them, really, which is an awful lot to think about when you've just graduated with a PhD and you've got an idea. But actually, you do need to think a little bit ahead.
Andrew, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, working for Amazon for the last while, slightly different take on it. I think if you have startup ideas, then you're worrying both about financial capital, but also intellectual capital. So we've had quite a lot of people who have either came to Amazon having tried startups, some found some success, some didn't, but that's always interesting for us. People with that kind of mindset are the kind of people we want to attract. But people have also worked for Amazon for a while and then moved on to do their startups afterwards. So there's two upsides to this, I think. One is, if you have software development skills, business development skills, these are economically valuable skills, I mean, as Polly pointed out. And if you can get working for a few years, you could get yourself personally into a more comfortable financial position that makes you more relaxed about taking risks on a startup. And the other thing is knowledge. If you're going into a startup, it's good to have learned something about the ups and downs. Internally, Amazon organise ourselves into teams of maybe about 10 people who own a chunk of the business. They're responsible for the business, the finance, the architecture, development. And so they act like effectively mini startups within a larger organisation. And the kind of skills that you learn there, I think, are very transferable to doing a startup yourself. But you're also getting the benefit of the experience of the people around you who've already made some of the mistakes that you could avoid doing. So I think it's potentially a useful thing to spend some time gaining more knowledge about business in a company like Amazon, for example, and that might be quite useful when you go on and pursue your idea and try to make a go of it.
Useful? Good. Okay, who's the next question?
Sure. I think Andrew said earlier, on some level, it's just, have you really made good use of your 3, 4, or 5 years? You know, what have you got to show for it? So you'd be compared with someone who's worked for 5 years or 3 years. In the past, I've specifically recruited for, you know, postdocs and PhDs, and so we wanted very specific knowledge, and we were prepared to trade off some inexperience, and you know, we knew we would have to essentially train people to work in the kind of industrial context in return for that. But most of the time, I would say it's more, are you going to be an accelerator in terms of the intellectual strength of the company or a team that maybe an undergraduate wouldn't necessarily have, but on some level you have to at least be as good as someone who's worked for 3 to 5 years, in simple terms.
Also.
On a similar note, I think there could be specific skills and knowledge that you be bringing to the business. So in our labs team, for example, we're sort of recruiting people with machine learning backgrounds at the moment. In the past, we've done people with natural language processing backgrounds. So that's an advantage of a PhD student, is that you'd have far deeper knowledge of that than potentially, certainly an undergraduate, but potentially even someone who had worked in industry. But the challenge, though, to differentiate from a graduate otherwise is about sort of the skills that you developed whilst carrying out the doctorate, and that can be sort of research skills, the ability to autonomously manage yourself, whether you've and also just practices within software development that sort of are using the software, the tools and the libraries and the technologies that we use already and that are commonly used within the industry. From my perspective, particularly within web technology businesses. So other additional skills you can bring as a PhD student that you learn along the way that would actually then fill in that gap of having the skills as if you've been working in industry for that time, as well as the specific knowledge that you could potentially bring in, and also the research mindset.
I think it's a really interesting one. For us, for PhD, we're looking for people that have done something that's interesting in our sector, so someone that's bringing additional knowledge into the business. We're a really young team. You know, our oldest person's 31 years old. He hates it when I tell people that. It's great fun. But in reality, because of that, we're looking for people that have done something interesting in their own time, who have a desire to work in a really fast-moving and energetic environment. Because for us, it's, you know, we're not the size of any of these businesses, so actually it's very kind of tight-knit. You know, sometimes you will be working very much by yourself on an idea or part of a project, but you have to be able to do that and be happy to do that as well, and understand that, you know, we're a very fluid environment still, because we're still at that early stage. We're still, you know, understanding the customer in more and more depth and still kind of adapting to that. I think from a further point, we're looking generally for just interesting people, you know, people that can actually showcase that they've done something, they've made something. If you know, from our point of view, what gets us really excited and our last 2 hires has been people who we've taken who've got much less experience, but they've actually built a product and shipped it. You know, they've actually taken something and putting it into other people's hands. It might not be perfect, but when you talk to them about it, they know the issues, or they know where it falls down, and they've just never had that feedback loop, because they've just sat and done it themselves. But, you know, for us, if you can come in and you can showcase, you know, I've built this and people have used it, that's worth more than anything else. That's worth more than 5 years in industry, in my mind.
Simon, you want to add to that?
Yeah, in pure terms, we're really looking for intellect in the first instance. So yes, it's a higher level of intellect, but we're looking for creativity and innovation, because we're trying to reshape our business. So we're looking for someone who can bring something new to the party. They've taken an idea. Actually, you might have worked on it for 3, 4, 5 years and found out it doesn't work. But the process of going through that is this kind of that ideas generation, and that analysis is the sort of thing that we're looking for in our business to analyse whether we can take something to the market and sell it, or whether the market's not going to want it.
Okay. Andrew, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think there's a broad range of PhD topics that we see, and you know, in computing, it's everything from abstract math all the way across to like very concrete building systems, and so we see a wide range. When we're hiring for software development positions, we're thinking, how quickly is this person going to get up to speed with the different skills that are required, like Rodrigo was saying. You can look at our job adverts. We list the skills that we think are important, and you can see which ones you already have or which ones you might need to work to demonstrate. But when we're hiring people, it's much better if people can show evidence of these different skills, be that internships, where you've already worked as part of a development team, or open source contributions. You can actually point to code and say, look, I can program large systems and work collaboratively with people. So it's relatively rare that there's a perfect alignment between projects and coming on board, but the kind of communication skills, the ability to be enthusiastic and passionate about what you're doing is the kind of thing that people pick up during PhDs. Sometimes people are sick of the topic by the time they end, but that's the kind of transferable skills that are important in industry. They're important in life in general. But probably the meta point is understanding that there are different roles in life, and when you're doing a PhD, you're doing a particular role. There are particular things that you need to focus on. When you're working in a startup or you're working in a larger organisation, you're doing a different role there, and you have to understand and kind of morph yourself, present yourself in the right way to be able to demonstrate your strengths.
Can I just add
Yes, go on.
I was trying to think of something specific. What could be the difference between the undergraduate and the PhD? And I think that there's probably two things that I would value and would probably find reason to look for someone. And one of them is, I think has been mentioned, the kind of the intellectual side of having really triaged ideas to find the one thing that is going to be new enough and kind of valid enough. And that's really important from an innovation point of view when you're trying to sift through a massive amount of competitive information out there. Is my product idea really new or valid? That's kind of a similar thing. That's kind of quite unusual to be able, but you might get that opportunity. I think the one skill that I have found useful in the past and I think would be useful going forward is the ability, I think as Alistair said, in terms of the scientific side of running an experiment. That's one thing that you don't really get to do at undergraduate level, but I think in most PhDs, and I think even in computer science PhDs, you kind of have to do and structure quite a lot, is, how do I structure, how do I know when I've got it right, how do I measure what's right? I'm just running a project now on the quality of bioinformatics, and it would be great to have someone on the team who kind of have done more structured experiments on that, because getting good information out of that exercise is really important. So I think that's one thing that you probably have an advantage over just a kind of undergraduate specifically.
I think you'll get a range of answers to this one. We'll start with Alistair on this one. You've done both, haven't you?
I've done both. So I can't. It can work out if you jump out of academia and start working on your own. And it's, I suppose, one thing about doing a startup is you learn things incredibly quickly because you fulfill every role within the business, or you and your co-founders do, and you get exposure to a huge range of different things. So I think you can learn a huge amount by just going straight into a startup instead of accelerated learning, and you get involved in so many experiences. If you want a slightly less risky approach to that, I've worked for companies of a range of sizes, but most of them are quite small businesses. And again, if there's a university spin-out company or a small company like that, that's another way of getting that taster of the skills and decisions and practices you need to perform in order to be successful founding a business and doing it yourself. So there's also the opportunity of going and working for another small company. And then obviously at the other end of the spectrum, there are things like graduate programs in big businesses. But I'd question, you need to make sure that was going to give you the skills that you think you might be missing or that you'd want or need in order to found your own business.
Carly, you've done this.
Yeah, I think it really does. Again, it's weird. It really depends on you. It depends how confident you feel about your own skill set or the skill sets of the people that you'd be going off to start something with. I think we kind of pride ourselves on the idea that if you join a business like our sort of size, where we are kind of like around that 10 people mark, you're going to see all aspects of it. You're going to understand the process that goes into fundraising, the timescales that it takes, the things you have to produce that goes with it. You're going to understand, how we market a product and how, all the effort that goes into that, the different strategies we look at, the difference between your CPA and your LTV and all those different elements. So I think for a couple of years, it can be a really powerful thing. Something that, our senior team, we kind of take pride in is that, we do give people that sort of insight and that sort of level of knowledge. And I hope, some day further down the line, they'll all start something themselves at some point. Hopefully it'll be after we've sold out and they can use their money to be their seed and stuff. But I think what's really interesting from our point of view is from our team, pretty much everyone's either started something or has, really kind of gone quite far down the road to do it, but has then realised that actually, do you know what, I want to be in something that's kind of early still, so I can learn for a period of time before then moving on to it. I've got a lot of friends in graduate programs and kind of who've gone to work for big businesses, and I genuinely think once you go to work for a big business, the chances of you coming back out are very slim, because actually once you're in there, you get used to that level of life. You get used to the salary, you get used to all those things. I went into big business and left again after 6 months because I wanted to do my own thing, but I think the percentage of people who actually do that is actually relatively small. Whilst you're coming out of academia, whilst you're coming out of a PhD or undergrad, you don't have those things yet, so you wouldn't miss them. So actually, I think it's sometimes worthwhile just diving into something smaller for a period of time and then picking up all the skill sets you need to then go on and start something yourself.
I think that sounds like very good advice. Anybody want to add to that? From our slightly larger businesses, Rodrigo and Andrew. Right, start with Rodrigo. Andrew, I'll come to you next.
Okay. So I think it's really important. It's really up to you. And I think, what can you achieve in a big company? It can be fantastic. Some have fantastic R&D organizations, and I've often thought, wouldn't it be great to have the resources of one of those companies? Personally, and these are personal things, I think if resilience in the economic market changes is important to you, then not becoming institutionalized is probably a good thing. So if you move from a very comfortable situation in one company and move to just stay in another comfortable situation, you're going to, it's a passive scenario. You're going to be, if they go under or something goes wrong or some boss decides to reinvest in some other area, you're going to be at the receiving end of that. So if you want to control your career and achieve what you want, it doesn't have to be a startup, but it could just be being conscious of what role you're doing in that company. And personally, I've always found the startups and the SMEs a really great place to work with nice people, learn lots of things, and get experience. Sometimes that's turned into starting something. Sometimes that's taking someone else's idea and taking it forward as well. So I think either choice would be good. But maybe if you feel that coming out of the university there are some things you haven't learned or haven't had exposure to, especially some of the real commercial drivers, then working for someone else for a couple of years might be a good way to kind of balance that out.
Yeah, I don't think there's any wrong choices in life. They're almost all choices in life are reversible. I do think if you start working for a larger organisation and you've got some startup ideas in your head, it is quite difficult to make them happen. You just don't have that much time. As you go through life, you have less and less time. It doesn't get any better. And so if you're in a kind of like, someday I want to do this, someday hardly ever comes unless you force it. But having said that, working for a larger company as I do now, I'm very clear. I set my own compass. I understand what I get out of working for Amazon, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship. But I'll get shot for saying this, but I think of myself as Andrew, software professional, who happens to work for Amazon just now, because that's mutually beneficial. If I stopped enjoying that, or there was other opportunities, in the past I've moved between several companies. I feel I accumulate skills in working with companies, and these skills then belong to me. They're part of the package I can take to other companies or other opportunities. Very happy working for Amazon just now. I really enjoy it. But be conscious of why you're in your situation, and don't get too comfortable, because then the ups and downs will come along and you'll get bounced around.
Simon, what would you want to add to that?
I'd probably the recruiter's perspective. So I've been HR all my life, and I've seen quite a sea change in the way that recruiters look at people and their careers. And the fact that you've gone into a big business and banged out after a year or 2 years doesn't make a blind bit of difference to a recruiter. Actually, you know, if you've changed, you have 4 or 5 jobs over 10 years, that doesn't matter either. It used to be different 20 years ago. You probably move every 4 or 5 years and that would be your maximum. But life's very different now. So if you make a decision that you want to go into a big business and you leave it after 2 years, it doesn't really matter. Learn something from it, take the best from it and learn more about yourself and what you want. And I would just say it is absolutely horses for courses. It's whether you want to work in an SME world or a big business.
I think the other thing you should bear in mind, if you've got a great idea and you want to start it up, and particularly if it's got application in a particular field that you don't necessarily understand that field terribly well. So a good example would be financial services. Lots of people come out with great ideas about things that might work for the financial services sector, and because they haven't had that immersion in the financial services sector, don't necessarily have enough domain expertise to turn that idea into a viable product. It is, in some cases, worthwhile getting a bit of domain expertise by working in that industry. And then what we tend to see is there are 3 or 4 areas where people tend to start up. Very many of them start up coming out of university. That's a great time to start up because you don't have a whole range of, A, you have no expectation of earning huge amounts of money immediately, and B, you don't necessarily have all the responsibilities like mortgages and things that people tend to attract a bit older. But the other group of people we see starting up very often is people who have worked in another industry for a while and come out with actually what's needed here is an X, and they develop that X and then take it to market. And because they understand the industry they've come out of and they develop that product for, they're very credible going in and selling that product back out. So I think you just have to weigh that up as well. I think there are benefits of having built up that domain expertise by working in the industry. Did we answer your question? Good, okay. All right, who's next? Callie, can I start with you? Do you have any PhDs on your workforce?
Really interesting one. Out of the 9 of us, we have no PhDs, but that's something we're changing just now because we're hunting for people, you know, data science and kind of analytics stuff because we're turning off all this data that now needs to be used. Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, I think I'm really excited to see so many people in this room today and people who are thinking about that changeover. You know, as Polly said at the start, I think it's kind of our job to come in here and try to rip some of you from academia and kind of force you into the, not force you, that sounds really bad, but actually encourage, suggest politely you come and join us in industry. Because there is challenges, you know, and there's really interesting challenges. You know, what excites me is the big challenges that we look at and the things that we're trying to change. And I think that sort of thing, you know, needs people that can kind of get deeper into the problems and kind of understand them. Because I think that's, in any role, it's about the challenges that you face and the things that you're trying to achieve. And actually, you know, in industry, you know, it's about, they're there, they're big, they're hairy. And actually the stuff that you do will be taken straight away and put into practice. So hence why we're really keen to kind of add more PhD people to our team.
Simon, right side of UC Thompson, two interconnected businesses. What's your experience when taking on PhDs?
We don't directly recruit PhDs, but we would welcome applications from PhD students or graduates. So, and that's because of the kind of intellect that we're looking for. So probably the quick answer is I don't know, because we don't capture it all the way down through the business because we're a business of 1,800 people. So I don't know how many PhDs we've got. At a senior level, the CEOs for our various businesses have come from INSEAD, Harvard, MIT, Cambridge. So we've got some really, really sharp people, but they tend to be, at the moment, at the top of the business because they're reshaping what we do and they're bringing creativity, innovation and strategic approach at a very corporate level. So I don't know how far down the business we would have PhDs, but there hasn't ever been a positive policy of recruiting just PhDs. It's about the right person for the job and what can they bring to the party.
Andrew?
I think we're about 10 to 20% of Amazon in Edinburgh's developers have PhDs. I think the people, they've excelled in their PhD and they joined Amazon. We were confident they would excel in this new area, and they have done so. They're smart people. They're adaptable people. The kind of problems that we solve day to day are different. They're hairier. They're multifaceted. It's not a kind of such a constrained problem area. But there's the lovely validation of, yeah, if stuff works, and the harsh reality is, you know, maybe for every 10 ideas I have, 2 or 3 turn out to be good. It's tough sometimes, but equally I find that really, really encouraging, that you can have an idea and, you know, the world can say, yes, that's a good idea. People vote with their feet. And I think the impact of when you have good ideas and they work out is really, really nice.
We're just going around the circle here. Rodrigo, what do you do in terms of PhDs?
So I can answer it slightly differently. If I look at the last 3 companies I worked with, the 3 companies ago, it was probably about 10 to 20%, if I think carefully, with PhDs. The last company, we were over 50% PhDs, which was quite unusual. This company, we're back down to about 5 to 10%. But if I think of every project that I'm involved in, there's probably at least 1 professor and possibly 2. So the PhD count over at a project level, and the kind of academic and intellectual kind of effort at the project level, is pretty high. So I think if we had more PhDs, we might interact better in those projects. But so it's not always about the company as a unit having the PhDs. You know, it could be just the customers you work with, the projects you work on, being kind of pretty intellectually quite high. And that's kind of why I enjoy working in the field I do. And also, you know, in medicine, you don't always get PhDs as such. You get a kind of a mixture of degrees, but it's essentially the same kind of depth of research and background. So.
Awesome.
I think it's about 5%. It's quite hard to know because people are just distributed across teams really, and sometimes some people have entered directly from a PhD, others have come in via different routes, such as they've worked at other places and then come in. So I think it's about 5%. Typically, I'd say on the whole, people do different things, very different things to what their research was in originally, other than sort of having a software background. They end up working in entirely different areas to what their research was in, possibly with the exception of the labs and R&D team, where people, if they've got a machine learning background and were recruited for that, would probably stay working on those types of problems.
Is that a reasonable answer? Yeah. I think you would find across the industry that the 5 to 10% is probably the norm rather than a higher percentage. There's a lot of masters students now working in the industry. I think that's been, you know, we've seen many more people do an undergraduate degree, then take a master's and then come into industry. I think if you look at some of the challenges the industry is facing, particularly around data science, I think the demand for people with PhDs will increase. I, as part of my homework for today, I had a chat with a couple of the recruitment agencies, and one of the things they said was that where companies take on PhDs, that person, the PhD graduate, is likely to move through the company faster than the equivalent person who'd come in as a graduate with 2 or 3 years experience and then grown in the business. So I think there is a recognition of the need for some of the skills that my colleagues around the circle have been talking about, needing in the industry. So I think there is a recognition of those additional skills that PhD students very often bring to the business.
I think so. I think the one area where I would say I've found it a disadvantage not to have a PhD would have been working in R&D in larger businesses. So I think when I've looked at my counterparts doing similar jobs in larger R&D departments of larger industries, I think I would have found it quite hard to get into their role because I didn't have a PhD. So I think if that's what you want, and as I said, I think they do fantastic R&D, then I think you're a definite advantage there. So.
And as you know, there is an increasing encouragement for industry to engage with the academic base in terms of research and things like the new data lab, Data Science Innovation Centre, as an example of that. I think the one thing universities need to look at is their pricing structure. It's very often difficult for companies to engage because of the costs. So that's a challenge. Okay, who's got another question for us? So the rest of the panel who've been at the bleeding edge on this one and had to do it will be able to correct me, but my understanding is you can get certainly business angel funding, and probably funding up to around $500,000, relatively straightforwardly from a Scottish or London or UK base. I think once you get beyond that $500,000, then you certainly got to go to London and possibly further overseas. Alistair will give you the Skyscanner perspective, but I think part of what you were doing was also to get global recognition, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the original one was Polly's rather than mine. So Skyscanner's first funding round did come from Scottish equity partners. So they come from a Scottish VC, although I know the founders went to many sort of investors across the UK. It just happened that there was a really good partner with SEP, and that's worked very well. Going for, as Polly rightly says, that once you get to certain amounts of capital to invest in the business, then there may not be the number of funds that are able to invest at that level or smaller. I specifically say with the Sequoia investment, a lot of the value for us of them was their being a Silicon Valley investor, invested in the likes of Apple and Facebook and Google, and they could bring extraordinary experience and contacts and network to us as an investor. So for us, it was not just the level of funds they're able to provide, but the kind of global network and the kind of companies that advised in the past.
I think that's an important distinction as well. You're not just getting money, you're getting experience as well, and having worked for venture capital funded startups and kind of privately held companies as well, that's a huge difference, being able to tap into that experience.
I think in Scotland today, I think you're probably looking, sub 1 million. It really depends on the industry. There's quite a lot of bio stuff about it just now. There's a couple of new funds and that side of things. There's only 2 Scottish VCs, SCP and Pentech, who are kind of between funds, I think, at the minute in time. So I think that's the sort of range the size you're looking at. Again, it does depend on the sector. I then think, you can probably get up to about, I think London's about 5-6 million, for things past that. Although there seems to be across Europe just now, so there seems to be some substantial rounds, kicking about, around the 20-25 million. It really does depend. I think you can do your angel stuff here, and there's lots of angel investors. You just have to kind of go through the shoe leather and actually just get out and talk to them.
Anybody want to add to that?
Just one thing that's not really been mentioned, maybe. Related to how you build things, sometimes you might think you have to build everything, and there are a lot of technology platforms out there. So, and it does something that comes with funding as well. So if you look at some of the larger technology companies, they have venture arms of their own. I worked for a startup before in the past that was funded through Novell, took an investment in it, and that's definitely a possibility, and that adds to who you bring onto your board or whatever. It does bring industrial experience as much as anything else, and partnering opportunities to get to market. So just kind of look out a little bit broader as well, maybe in terms of funding.
Simon, anything to add? No? Okay. I think the other thing, I think the point that was sort of made there, but was not the main point, was if you have a choice, go for expertise as well as money. I think that's one of the things that the Dragon's Den thing has definitely highlighted as a programme about business startups and raising funding in the UK, is that actually, with the right expertise and very often with the right contacts, taking less money but getting that person or those people may be more valuable to your business. So that's always something to think about. You're not always in the situation where you can choose between investors, but if you had that opportunity, then that would be my advice. Out of interest, who in this audience is thinking of going to work in industry once they've completed their PhD thesis? Well, quite a lot of you, that's interesting. Who would be interested in setting up their own business? Right, good, that's always very useful. It's good to see people interested in setting up their own business. Who amongst this audience would like to stay and work in the UK but won't be able to because of visa requirements? All right, I thought there might be more of you, right? That's good. Well, and who of you wants to stay and continue to work in research? Oh, right, one lone person at the back there. Professor Murray Smith. So it's interesting. Some of you have clearly not made up your minds yet. Well, you've got, I mean, we could all cut away early and let you get a longer coffee break, but you've got about 15 minutes more of this panel's time should you wish to use it. Please don't feel that you have to ask a startup question or a fundraising question, although we'll be running a separate clinic later for those people. But if you've got any particular questions you'd like to ask about, you know, who's here in Scotland, what you might want to do, where the roles are, this is your opportunity. So anybody with a last minute question? So I'm going to let everybody have do a reply to that. I don't know of very many companies who do open days like that. It's a great suggestion. This is an industry that is desperate for people, so we need to come up with bright new ways of getting people engaged. I do think certainly we see one of the things that Scotland IS runs is a placement program for undergraduates and master's students. And certainly the feedback from industry and from the students is placements and internships really do pay off in terms of, you know, you may come out and that company offers you a job, which is fantastic if that suits you, but also you may come out having gone, well, I went to work for these guys and actually they were a big company, I'd rather work with a small company, or vice versa. So I think it's good experience. I think there are always opportunities to do in-company projects as a PhD student, and I think industry is likely to step up to the mark more on that. There is at the moment a couple of jobs fairs which gives you an opportunity to see some of the companies who are hiring, but I'm going to just run around the group and ask them to let you know whether they'll do a doors open day. So we'll start with Amazon. You don't do doors open days, do you?
Not per se, but we're interested in meeting people and learning more about people and making connections. We've ran various kind of coding competition days at universities before that's been really well attended, and kind of 24-hour hackathon, try to come up with a cool idea, do it, and Amazon developers go along to these, and so it's an opportunity to spend some time bouncing ideas around, you know, coding with other people. So that's quite a kind of hands-on experience. We take on quite a lot of interns. There's a lot of competition for the intern positions. I would recommend, you know, asking early, doing a bit of research, understanding what would make you more attractive for the intern position. I think we're open to ideas about better ways to engage. I mean, you've got an idea of your calendar for the year, and you know when are good times and what kind of things you'd like to see. So I think we'd welcome suggestions of better ways to interact. And we can't literally open our doors. We've got lots of, you know, secret customer data that has to remain secret, but metaphorically, yeah, we're happy to engage more and spend more time explaining what we do and how you could be doing it as well.
Simon, what do you do at DC Thompson?
We run schemes for people right the way through from S2 right through to graduate internships. So we've got a number of things running all the time. We're always we're deluged by people wanting work placements or internships. But we do try to accommodate as many as we can. But specifically, we have talked about, within the technology business, having an open day, just to invite people to come in. And we have got the same issue around data and data security, but I think probably we can just about overcome it, because we're not nearly of the scale of Amazon. But yeah, I think we will do something like that in the future.
Alison.
So aside of internships and academic collaborations, which are run along as such as projects we do with MSc students, I think we don't have open days per se, but we do host and run quite a lot of events. So I mean, I imagine a lot of the benefit of the open day, aside of sort of getting to look at an office or a campus, would be to talk to people who work for the business and find out what it is they do each day. And if you go to Tech Meetup in Edinburgh, well, it's hosted in our offices, but there'll always be quite a few people from Skyscanner there, and there are other events we run like Product Tank and things like that. So I'd encourage you just to try and find the employee at one of those things and just ask them candid questions and find out what their experiences are, and try and make up your mind doing something like that.
Callie.
So we're a really open company, actually. So you can go onto our Twitter feeds and you can kind of see what we're up to on a kind of daily basis. We had a party last week because we've been on Twitter for 2 years, which was quite good fun. What we do is we obviously do, you know, lots of internships and stuff like that, and kind of lots of, we're hooked into Edinburgh Uni to do some kind of project driven stuff from them. But we also do kind of our own kind of internal hack days and stuff, which we open up to kind of special invites. So people that we think are interesting, people who want to kind of see how we operate a bit more. We kind of generally get about 30, 40 people into our offices, and then kind of split up into teams and then work on ideas, which then get open source afterwards. So people can kind of keep going on them if they want to go through them. I think our next one is in July. So, you know, if anyone fancies coming along to that, seeing how we operate and kind of jumping in, then please do say. I think what's really important in that is not just like, it's like how the offices are, but what the culture is. You know, how do people interact? How do, you know, us as businesses treat team members? You know, how do we all kind of get on? How do we communicate? Is there a really hierarchical structure, or is it all quite flat and, you know, everyone's kind of treated in the same sort of manner? And I think that's really interesting for people like yourselves who are coming from academia, who are looking at kind of startups and other businesses, is what's the culture? You know, how do I get into that and how do I become part of that? And I think stuff like open days, you know, we're not big enough to do an open day, sadly, but, you know, at the end of the day, that's what our hack days are kind of a bit about, and a bit of good fun at the same time.
Rodrigo.
Yeah, so I guess we've tried in the past and continue to kind of try to reach out into the research world, and so we do everything from undergraduate internships to funding clinical fellows. So we have people working part-time for us who are actually practicing clinicians. Currently have a master's intern, and we've got, I think we're advertising a PhD intern at the moment, so we're looking for applications. We support the doctoral training centres where they exist, and there's one in Edinburgh that's just starting off. I suppose an open day sounds like a great idea. For all the practical reasons, it's kind of quite tricky, but we have a kind of open door policy. So if anybody kind of contacts us and they're half credible, we'll usually give them an hour or two of our time and just, you know, try and talk to people as much as possible. So really open to it. I would definitely recommend the internship if that's an opportunity. I think we've found that that's useful for both people, and it gives you much more of a real sense of the day-to-day work. I mean, we're also setting up some hack days now with open data, which I think will give you an idea of the technology, but it won't give you an idea of the work, the day-to-day. So, yeah.
Okay, so Simon, what do? You don't do headhunting, do you?
No, but we look at what's happening on the market, and we would tend to buy a business with a very sharp guy running it. So we've done that set quite recently on a couple of occasions, and we're just in the process of buying another business based in the US for $15 million, and that's really because of the person who's running it and the idea that he's managed to generate.
So there you are. Give yourself a couple of years. DC Thompson will be after you. Andrew.
I think when we see people who have clearly demonstrated the kind of skills that we value, be that, you know, projects or at kind of the hack day events that we run and stuff like that, we actively try to find them. It's like Holly said at the start. The market is in your favour at the moment. It's an exciting time to be joining industry. It's very much on the way up, and so we want to be attracting and hiring the best. And so when we see people who we think look like the best, we will pursue them.
That sounds like a yes from Amazon. What do you do at Iridia?
We've always valued network recruitment, which is, I guess, another way of thinking of headhunting. So our ability to know people who are doing a PhD is relatively limited, but as you said, we do a lot of this outreach and connection. So yeah, absolutely. If someone in our network of connections and contacts would be useful, then we might proactively look to bring them in. And we certainly have done that in the past.
Callie.
I think to a certain extent, no, but at the same extent, a lot bit yes type thing. We do go to a lot of events and kind of engage with different groups. I think it's partly that networking thing. But I think headhunting, I hate that term anyway, it sounds awful. I think, you know, just being out there and talking to people, generally that's a good starting basis. You know, we've only ever hired one person that didn't come through our network, but in reality, you know, I consider all of you now part of my network. You know, if we sit and have a conversation, so that's another good way to kind of find people.
And finally, Alison.
It's very similar that we if we see someone give a really good presentation at an event, we may sort of go and talk to them and get to know them, or if you may meet people in communities, at hack days and other things, and say there is definitely that kind of recruitment from within a network, or just seeing what sort of things people put together, that we wouldn't sort of cold call a PhD student and pick them up in a limo, or that side of things. It's sort of, much more about just shared interest in what someone's working in and the things they're talking about and the events they're going to.
And I think it's worth pointing out that there is an increasing community of activity going around in Scotland, in Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh. There are tech meetups. There are a whole range of technology-related events that people get a chance to meet up. So I think the comment everybody's made about the network is very valuable. I think it is in headhunting. I think it is targeted recruitment, which is a different way of doing it. One of the things we're aware of is we run at an undergraduate level, rather people who have graduated level, we run a set of awards called the Young Software Engineer Awards every year. And we're conscious of one or two companies who have used that sort of, those top 4 students we pick out 4 students every year across the whole of the Scottish universities who just graduated with their first degree to win the award. And we know there are companies who target that list to go out and find those people. And if you get an award for something, if you get some sort of prize or mentions, that's always very valuable, because I think companies are being increasingly creative in the way they find the right people, because we are so short of talent in the industry. Okay, I don't want to hold you from your coffee break and your next session. I'd just like to thank everybody who took part today. I'm conscious we have 1 or 2 people who had lots of questions, which is great, and 1 or 2 of you who had fewer questions. But I hope you all have taken something away from today's session. As I said, the panel members are going to be here for a wee while yet, so if you wanted to grab one of them now's a good chance to do that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.